She shouldn't have touched that desk. Not after what she just overheard. Not after what they were about to do to her. Because in the next few hours, she would be labeled a liar. In the next few days, she would disappear. And by Christmas morning, someone powerful would be hunting her. That night, the office lights cast long shadows across empty marble floors. Security guards laughed in the lobby. Elevators hummed like nothing was wrong. And she stood alone in a glass office she wasn't supposed to be in, shaking, holding a pen that felt heavier than it should. Before we go further, hit subscribe right now. Stories like this don't come with warnings. Now, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And what time is it where you are? Because what she wrote on that desk was about to break a very dangerous man. She stood inside that mirrored box, heart hammering against her ribs like a warning she couldn't outrun. The kind of warning you feel in your bones before your brain finds the words. 15 floors, 14, 13. Each quiet chime felt louder than the last. Her reflection looked wrong in the polished steel, too pale, too tight, like someone wearing her face. The 20-second ride felt like a confession. When the doors finally slid open, the floor was deserted. After hours, the building became a cathedral of glass and shadow. White lights hummed in empty hallways. Carpets swallowed sound. Somewhere, an HVAC unit exhaled like a sleeping animal. Everything was clean. Everything was quiet. Everything was lying. She moved fast. Past the reception desk. Past the art no one ever looked at. Past the door that carried a plaque with a name that didn't scare people but should have. The office beyond it was dark. Not asleep dark. Waiting dark. Her badge worked on the first try. The click echoed too loud. Inside, the desk waited exactly where it always did. Straight lines, immaculate surface, a single framed photograph face down, as if it had been on trial and lost. The chairs were pushed in. The blinds were half open. The city glowed beyond the windows, a constellation of excuses in yellow and white. She closed the door behind her. Her hands were unsteady. The pen slipped between her fingers and hit the floor. The sound made her flinch. She crouched, retrieved it, stood too fast. The room spun for half a second and then snapped back into place. In her chest, something crackled. Not fear exactly, something sharper. The feeling you get when you realize the rules never included you. She looked at the desk, at the neat stacks she had arranged that morning, at the faint smudge on the glass she had wiped twice, at the place where so many decisions were made without faces attached to them. Then she wrote. No speeches, no paragraphs, just a line. Thick ink. No room for misunderstanding. She left it where it couldn't be missed. She turned to go. And froze. Footsteps. Low voices outside the door. The easy kind. The comfortable kind. The sound of men who didn't believe in locked rooms. Her breath disappeared. She ducked behind the tall chair as the door cracked open. Light slashed into the office. A shadow leaned in. Another shadow laughed. Thought he'd still be here, someone said. Guy never leaves, another answered. A pause. A squint. Lights were off. Forget it. The door drifted closed. She didn't move until the air returned. When she finally stood, her knees felt like borrowed furniture. She slipped out another way, down a stairwell that smelled faintly of cleaner and rain. Level after level. Her lungs burned. Her palms sweated. Her phone kept vibrating in her pocket, even though she hadn't turned alerts back on yet. She didn't look. In the garage, the car took 2 tries to start. When it did, she didn't stop shaking until the city fell away in pieces. By the time she pulled into her apartment, it was past midnight. The hallway light flickered like it was tired too. Inside, the rooms felt smaller than they had that morning, as if the walls had quietly leaned in. She locked the door. Then she locked it again. Only then did she check her phone. 3 missed calls. No names. Different numbers. A 4th buzzed in as she stared. Unknown caller. She let it ring out. The voicemail arrived without ceremony. A man's voice. Calm. Smiling with his mouth, not his eyes. Wrong place to leave messages, he said. We should talk. She deleted it. Her knees gave out under the kitchen counter. She slid down, pressed her forehead to the cool cabinet door, tried to remember how breathing used to work. Images crowded her head. Papers, numbers that stopped making sense. A hospital hallway that smelled like antiseptic and fear. A face she loved dulling into something else. She stood again, packed without a plan. Clothes became shapes. The passport went into the side pocket. Cash from a book on the shelf. Shoes she never wore. A scarf that still smelled like winter. In the silence, she heard it again. The sentence. The one that had rewritten her future. She didn't cry until she was out of breath. At 3 a.m, she wrote another line. This time on a piece of paper from the drawer she had never used. She folded it once. Then again. No address. Just instruction. She slid it under the door of a man who still thought the world would always answer him. In the dark, she left. The city pretended nothing was wrong. The next morning arrived dressed as usual. Coffee lines, news alerts, traffic. Confident streets did not care who had broken in the night. High above it all, in an office that forgot nothing, the desk waited. A key turned. Footsteps crossed the room. Silence noticed the paper first. He saw it the way you notice a flame in a room you thought was safe. Instantly, without wanting to. White against the dark wood. Folded. Intentional. Bandit bright. He set his jacket down without taking it off. Picked up the paper. Unfolded it. 3 words. No signature. No explanation. Just a door and a sentence. The room tilted. For a second, he wasn't in the city anymore. He was someplace colder, smaller. A room he had promised himself he'd never remember again. His jaw tightened as if to keep something inside. He looked up at the doors as if she might be waiting there. She wasn't. He moved to the window and watched the city that answered him for a living. On the desk sat something else. A ticket. One-way Aspen. He stood there longer than he meant to. Felt the weight of the building above him like a secret pressing down. That note had not been a goodbye. It had been a dare, an accusation. A map with its compass snapped in half. He reached for his phone, hesitated, changed his mind. The city, unaware, exhaled another day into being, and somewhere on a highway that promised snow and answers, a woman drove without turning back. What neither of them knew, not yet, was that other eyes had already started watching. What neither of them dared to guess was that the note on that desk had just set something enormous into motion. The office didn't feel empty anymore. It felt staged, as if something had been moved when his back was turned, as if the room itself had decided to withhold the truth until it was ready to hurt him with it. He walked behind the desk slowly, not because he wanted to, because he needed each step to confirm that the floor was still real. The note was still there. 3 words that insisted on meaning more than they said. He didn't sit. He opened drawers instead. The top one first. Old habit. Pens aligned with military discipline. Spare cufflinks he never wore. A receipt he forgot to throw away. Everything ordinary. Everything pretending. The second drawer gave him paper cuts of memory. Sticky notes in her handwriting. Not instructions. Reminders. Call florist. Reschedule 3 p.m. Fix projector. Her ink always leaned slightly right, like it was in a hurry to be useful. The third drawer fought back. Inside, in a narrow envelope wedged behind folders, was something that did not belong here. A different name. Not hers. A plastic card with someone else's face and her eyes wearing it. He turned it over. Expiration date in the future. Not a mistake. A choice. His pulse became a sound he couldn't escape. He moved to the side cabinet. He didn't know why. He only knew his hands had decided before he did. Inside, everything was organized by color. Everything neat. Everything wrong. Below the files was a flat folder he had never seen before. Inside it were copies. Medical forms. 2 different addresses. 2 different signatures. 1 body. The dates didn't line up. Neither did the story. Something cold settled behind his sternum, the way weather does when it's about to change without permission. He stacked the papers in the order they had lived in his gut since he found them. His breathing went thin. The office light flickered as if it were thinking about joining the chaos. In the bottom drawer, under envelopes he had opened 100 times without noticing, was an object that made no sense. A passport, not worn, not new, stamped once. A place that meant snow. He let the drawer close by itself. He stood there long enough for the room to start whispering again. She had walked these floors every day for 2 years. She had arranged his world in quiet ways that fooled him into believing it ran on its own. She anticipated his likes, his silences. She brewed coffee the exact bitter way he needed it before he knew he did. She never said much, but when she did, it landed like a decision he didn't argue with. She was the pause between meetings, the calm in the middle of battles, the last person to leave, the first to arrive. And now, someone else entirely. He crossed the room and picked up the photograph that always sat face down. Turned it over. It was from a charity gala years ago. A crowd frozen in smiles. Protest in tuxedos and dresses. Faces performing happiness. He had never noticed her in it before. Now he couldn't not see her. In the background, slightly out of focus, wearing someone else's badge, carrying a tray that didn't match her posture. She wasn't staff, not that kind. Her eyes were on him, not the don't notice me look of someone invisible. The look of someone watching, the kind you only understand after it's too late. He lowered the picture, dizzy with the realization that nothing about her had been accidental. Not her silence, not her timing, not her presence behind his shoulder on bad days when the room felt smaller than it should. A sound pulled him sharply into the present. The office door, soft knock, once. "Everything okay in there?" a voice called. He didn't respond. He slid the photo back, face down. The knock didn't come again. He crossed to the desk and stared at the place where she had stood. The same height as his shoulder. The same angle she always leaned when she waited for him to finish a thought. The ghost of peppermint and paper still hovered there, stubborn as her absence. Her chair was gone, not empty. Gone. He checked the coat closet. Her scarf wasn't on the hook anymore. The pale one she always forgot. A hollow pressed into his ribs like a fingerprint on his desk. Beneath the ticket to Aspen sat one more thing he hadn't seen before. A thin envelope. Plain. Unsealed. Inside it was nothing dramatic. No confession. No apology. No explanation. Just a folded scrap of paper torn from a larger thing. On it, in the same hurried tilt as every reminder she ever wrote, were 4 words. "You don't know me." His throat closed. The room seemed to lean closer, conspiratorial. The truth didn't announce itself. It waited. And in the waiting, everything that had ever made sense began to quietly change its shape. Somewhere between the desk and the window he understood the worst part. Not that she had lied. Not even that she had a second life. It was that she had stood next to him every day with a storm in her chest, and never let him feel a single drop of it. The ticket to Aspen caught the light. One way. It reflected back at him like a choice pretending to be a coincidence. He reached for it, paused, then folded it once, twice, slid it into his pocket, because if she had become a stranger overnight, then he was about to become a man who followed her into the dark. The plane cut through a sky so clean it looked staged. Snow floated below like a warning written in white. Aspen welcomed him the way beautiful places always do, silently daring you to believe they are harmless. By the time he stepped onto the tarmac, cold had already crept into his bones. The kind of cold that doesn't ask permission. It simply moves in and makes a home of you. He didn't stop for luggage. He barely noticed the driver waiting with a placard that wasn't his name. He took a rental instead, hands stiff on the wheel, breath fogging glass that refused to stay clear. The town rose out of snow like a secret ceremony, string lights over empty sidewalks, window displays glowing with rehearsed cheer. Christmas pretended harder here than anywhere else. Pine wreaths, silent carriages, music drifting out of shops that had already locked their doors. Everything looked like forgiveness. He followed the address on the ticket past the last cafe, past the last restaurant still pretending to serve dinner, up a road that traded people for pines, up a hill that decided privacy was a human right. The driveway was a ribbon of ice. At the top, the lodge waited. Not grand in the loud way, not flashy, quiet wealth. Old money wearing a softer coat. Lights were on in only one wing. The rest of the house held its breath. He knocked. Once. Nothing. Twice. Still nothing. He tried the handle because hope has a bad habit of turning into courage when it doesn't know what else to do. Unlocked. The entryway smelled faintly of wood and citrus. A fire was dying in one hearth, its light barely alive. Boots by the door. 2 pairs. One wrong size for her. He followed the noise without hearing it. The ache without naming it. In the glassed-in solarium, she lay collapsed on the couch like a secret that had finally quit. Her face was too pale. Her hands were too cold. Her breath was wrong. He was moving before the fear had time to make words. Her name fell out of him in a voice he didn't recognize. She didn't answer. He gathered her like something that could leave if he didn't hold it right. Light as winter. Heavy as consequences. Her lashes were wet. Not from tears. From something else. He wrapped her in the blanket on the chair. Pressed his forehead to hers. Counted breaths, the way you count seconds in a room you're not sure you'll get out of. "What did they do to you?" he said into her hair, not caring who heard. Her eyes fluttered. For a moment he thought she wasn't going to come back. Then she did. Not all of her, but enough. "Don't," she whispered, a thread of a word. "Don't bring them here." "Who?" he said. Her mouth tried to make a shape. Failed. Then succeeded. "Everyone." He laughed once without humor. The sound cracked midair. "You're safe. I'm here." Her eyes focused like someone returning from underwater. "That's what makes it worse." The ambulance felt too loud for a place built to collect silence. Paramedics asked questions he couldn't answer. Names that rearranged themselves in his mouth. Dates that refused to line up. A pulse that ran badly from the truth. In the emergency room, White swallowed everything. Lights, curtains, the smell of antiseptic and old snow. He stood too close, sat too near, spoke too softly, watched the line on the monitor rise and fall like a fragile truce. When she woke again, it was slower. Calmer. Her eyes searched until they found him. Then she cried like the room had finally admitted what it was. He didn't know what to do with that kind of crying. A quiet, breaking down sound that made hours out of minutes. He just stayed, held her hand like it was an apology. "I tried to run," she said. He said nothing. "I really tried." He nodded like that mattered. "They don't believe in running," she added, and almost smiled. Almost. "What did you leave behind?" he asked. She closed her eyes. "Everything." A nurse interrupted with paperwork and concern, and eyes too kind to mean much tonight. He answered anyway, signed forms like they were promises. When they finally let her leave, the storm had arrived without asking. Snow crushed the night. The drive back to the lodge was quiet in the way secrets are quiet when they're deciding who to tell first. Inside, the fire had died. He started it again. She watched him from the couch with an expression that remembered too many endings. "You shouldn't have come," she said. He didn't look at her when he answered. "You shouldn't have stayed alone." The fire caught fast, greedy for warmth. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders, as if it were a truth she could live inside. "I don't exist the way you think I do," she said. He turned then. Watched her breathe. Waited for the lie. None came. "I never worked for you," she went on, soft but steady now. "Not really. I wasn't placed by you. Not hired by chance. And certainly not innocent." He didn't interrupt. "I didn't touch your life by accident. I studied it. Learned your rhythms, the way you take coffee, the way you go quiet when you're angry, the way you never look at photographs because you don't want to be reminded that time is unpaid labor." He smiled without wanting to. "I thought if I stayed long enough," she said, "I might become the person you thought I was." "And did you?" he asked. She hesitated. "Yes." The fire cracked loudly. like it was trying to make a point. Her eyes were glassy, fighting something, losing with grace. "I didn't come here to disappear," she said. "I came here because this is the only place they didn't already own." He sat across from her without thinking, close enough for heat to be shared, too close for denial to breathe. "Who?" he asked again. She met his eyes like a confession stepping onto a witness stand. "My family," she said. "My past. My mistakes. Pick one." They all filed the same way. He waited. She exhaled. "I left because I had to," she went on. "I stayed away because it was the only way to keep you clean." He laughed again. Smaller this time. Dangerous. "I don't care about clean." Her mouth almost curved. Almost. "That's what scares me." Outside, the storm rearranged the world. Trees whispered against glass. Snow erased tracks like it always had somewhere better to go. Inside, two lives began to admit they were not coincidences. When she finally slept, it was in the quiet center of the couch, curled inward like she was trying to remember something human. He stayed awake and watched the fire finish its work. Hours bled into each other. At dawn, the light climbed the walls like it was searching too. He found movement first. Not sudden, not dramatic, small. Her hand, her stomach. Barely there, accidental. Not meant to be seen. But it was, and it changed the air. He didn't understand it yet. He only knew something had just been named, even if neither of them had words for it. Not yet. Not bright, not warm. Just honest. The kind of light that doesn't try to be kind about what it shows you. She woke slowly, like someone coming back from a place that hadn't wanted to return her. Her lashes moved first, then her fingers, then the look in her eyes that said she'd remembered everything before she opened them. He was in the chair across from the couch, not sleeping, not pretending to, just there. The fire had become ash. The room wore yesterday in tired colors. She pushed herself upright and immediately regretted it. The world tilted like it had opinions. His hand caught her before gravity finished its sentence. "Easy," he said. The words sounded new in his mouth. She let herself lean into him because her body refused to argue with what felt real for the first time in weeks. For a second, just a second. She forgot about phone calls and doors and names that were never really hers. Then it all came rushing back. "I should go," she whispered. He didn't let her move. "Someone already tried to make you disappear," he said. "You don't just go after that." She looked at him, searched his face the way people search skies for warnings. "Yesterday you had a desk," she said softly. "Today you have a storm. Don't trick yourself into thinking that's the same thing as safety." He almost smiled. Almost. The clinic was quiet. Too quiet for something that scared people for a living. Soft chairs, softer music. A smell that lived halfway between lemon and lies. The doctor spoke gently, the way doctors do when they know language breaks in rooms like this. He stood beside her the entire time. Didn't pace, didn't check his phone, didn't eye exits. He learned stillness from her without realizing he was being taught. The screen lit up. Flicker. Pulse. Another. The sound hit him first. Not 1, 2. The doctor's mouth formed words he didn't remember hearing. Just felt. 2 heartbeats. Twins. She stared at the ceiling like it was suddenly too small for all the futures trying to climb out of her. "No," she said without a voice. He stared at the screen like it was proof and prophecy and punishment in a single frame. "You're sure?" he asked the air. The doctor didn't blink. She started crying before she understood why. Not loud. Not cinematic. The kind that leaves salt in your throat. The kind that apologizes. "They can't," she whispered. "They can't exist." He did something he had never once allowed himself to do in a professional setting. He reached for her hand. Not careful. Not measured honest in a way that frightened him. "They already do," he said. Outside, the snow was doing what it always did when truth came to town. Covering nothing. Making everything louder. Back at the lodge, she paced. He watched. Her hands touched walls that could not answer her. Her eyes memorized windows like they were names. She kept stopping and starting like her body was trying to negotiate with itself. "They'll use them," she said. "They use everything. People, illness, bodies. They don't see life. They see leverage." He leaned against the counter because his balance was asking hard questions. "Who taught you that word?" he asked. "Leverage." She laughed once, then stopped. "My mother," she said, "right before she taught me how to disappear." He didn't know why, but that sentence made him angry in places he had never used. "They don't get to touch you," he said. Her mouth trembled. "Everyone says that before they leave." He didn't. He didn't promise either. He simply stood there like gravity had finally chosen a side. "We don't tell anyone," she said, fast, desperate. "Not your staff, not your family, not your world. My world is right here," he said before he could check the words for reasons. She looked at him like she might believe him if he stopped moving. "If you choose me," she said carefully, "they don't come for you politely. They rip your life open and read until they find something that hurts." His jaw set. "Let them read." She shook her head. "You don't understand." "I understand power," he said. "I understand when someone mistakes silence for permission." She stopped pacing, stood in front of him like a verdict. "You don't understand the scale of this," she said. "They don't lose." He thought of the desk, of the note, of how small his world had become over 3 words. "Neither do I," he said. "I rewrite." Silence pressed in like it wanted to listen. She walked away from him then, headed for the bedroom without asking. When she came back, she had a bag. Not a suitcase. A bag. The kind you pack for an ending with no witnesses. "I can't bring this into your house," she said. "Your name is too clean for my history." He stepped closer. "So change the history," he said. "Not the house." She swallowed. The room felt suddenly smaller. She pulled a piece of paper from the bag. Same hand, same tilt. "This is the last one," she said. "If you keep it, you keep me. If you don't, you pretend you never found me here." The fire had died again while they were breathing their own courage. He took the paper from her without reading it, slid it into his pocket. "I don't negotiate with ghosts," he said. Her eyes told him how dangerous that sentence was. So did her mouth. She kissed him like someone leaving a country. Not with joy. With finality. With heat that had been caged too long. With sorrow that didn't have anywhere else to go. When she pulled back, she was shaking. So was he. "I have to go before they realize I didn't report in," she said. "Report to who?" he asked. She didn't answer. She moved past him, toward the door, toward snow and silence and consequences. He followed. "I'll come with you," he said. She stopped like someone hit by a memory. "No," she said, not cruel, not cold. "If you walk out that door with me, they don't stop with threats. They end you." He laughed without humor again. "They already tried." She looked at him. A crack appeared. Just one. "I'll find you," he said. She shook her head slowly. "For your own good," she whispered. "You won't." She opened the door. Cold rushed in. Snow carried 1,000 goodbyes. Before she stepped out, she turned. Touched his chest once, briefly. Like a promise she hadn't decided to keep. "Don't follow me," she said. Then she was gone. By the time the door finished making sense of itself, her footprints were already filling in. The storm had no intention of remembering her. He stood there longer than necessary. Long enough to realize the house had become empty with purpose. Long enough to feel the echo she left settle into the places where certainty used to live. Then his phone lit up. One message, no name, no punctuation, just words that did not ask to be believed. You should stop looking for her. He typed nothing, deleted nothing, stared at the door, and understood finally that Aspen had never been an escape. It had been a warning. Morning in Manhattan arrived dressed in confidence. Suits, coffee, headlines that smiled the way sharks do. The kind of day that makes you think the world is stable until it slips, and you realize stability is staged lighting. He returned alone. The penthouse did not ask where she was. The elevator did not pause for tribute. The city did not care how cold Aspen had been. He moved through rooms that had once required permission from his pulse. Now they obeyed. 2 days later, the announcement detonated in public without warning. A press release appeared at 8:01 a.m. A photograph followed it. Then another. Then another. A woman at his side. Poised. Perfect. Touchable from a distance. A name the city recognized. Engaged. The word crawled across screens the way a verdict does. Engaged to a future that wasn't his. He himself did not speak. His wedding said everything for him. Across the country, 3 states away in a room that smelled of bleach and winters she could not afford. She saw it on a television hung too high on the wall. She was brushing her hair when the photograph slid into her life like it belonged. She dropped the brush. It didn't break. She did. She turned the sound off and sat on the edge of a stranger's bed in the rental she was using for a name that didn't belong to her. Her phone vibrated. Then again. Then again. Different numbers. Same message. "We warned you." She did not cry this time. She stared at the screen like it might apologize. It didn't. By the afternoon, flowers were delivered to the penthouse. Expensive apologies from people who didn't know they were wrong yet. Champagne uncorked itself in rooms she no longer existed in. He accepted congratulations with a face that practiced absence. At night, when the city fell asleep in its makeup, he sat alone in the dark and poured whiskey he didn't drink. He reread the last line she had written. Read it backwards. Read it wrong. Read it until it wrote him instead. The doorbell rang once, late and wrong. He didn't rise. It rang again. Sharper. He opened it with a patience that has already died. A woman stood there who did not belong to parties. Her hair was a mess of wind and urgency. Her coat smelled like rain and something older. Fear, maybe, or truth. "You don't know me," she said. "But she said you might listen." He blinked. The name came out of her mouth in a whisper like a dare. His. Then hers. He stepped aside without a question. Inside, she stood like nothing in her life had ever been stable. "My name doesn't matter," she said. "I'm just the worst part of her history knocking." He waited. "She used to be brave alone," the woman went on, "until she wasn't allowed to be." He said her name once. The woman nodded. "They found her," she said. "They didn't take her. Yet." She dropped something on the floor between them. A phone cracked. Still alive. "She asked me to give you this if anything went wrong," the woman said. "I didn't think wrong would come dressed like engagement photos." He picked it up with hands that suddenly remembered how to shake. On the lock screen, one message remained. Not scheduled, not protected, just surviving. "If you're reading this, it means I failed at disappearing." His jaw locked. The woman leaned against the doorframe as if the world were a little too much weight to hold without help. "They use hospitals," she said. "They use debt. They use family the way other people use knives." Something sharp slid into place behind his eyes. "Who?" he asked. She named no one. Only places. Phantom companies. Charitable arms with dirty knuckles. Units that wore medicine like a costume. "They don't kill," she said. "They hollow out. They leave shells intact so the world keeps applauding." He looked down at the phone like it might bleed. "Where is she?" he asked. The woman hesitated, then told him a lie that felt close enough to truth to be dangerous. "Running," she said later that night. The penthouse took on a sound he had never heard before. Typing. Not emails. Not statements. Searches. He watched the web unspool with its teeth bared. Names erased themselves. Archives blinked offline. Accounts slept that had never slept before. Something in his blood woke up and started keeping time. In another city that never slept for different reasons, she lay in a clinic hallway that kept its lights bright for sins it would not confess. The ceiling tiles looked like coordinates. Her phone was gone. No signal. No silence either. Just footsteps that passed too slowly. Behind a curtain that did not believe in privacy, a voice said her name wrong on purpose. Down the hall, a cart rolled. Metal-kissed tile. Somewhere close, latex snapped. She closed her eyes and counted heartbeats that did not feel like her own. 2. Always 2. Back in New York, the engagement ring caught a flash from a camera that wasn't invited. He did not flinch. He did not smile. He watched the city like a man studying a map before choosing where to burn. And the woman who had come uninvited sat on a kitchen counter in silence and whispered to empty air. "You should have run faster." Outside, the city kept acting. Inside, something moved. Something old. Something expensive. Something violent. The war had dressed itself as romance, and everyone applauded. He didn't sleep. Not because of the engagement. Not because of the cameras. Not even because of her. He didn't sleep because the building was finally telling the truth. At 3 a.m, light poured out of his office like a confession no one asked for. Screens bloomed in the dark. Files breathed open. Histories rearranged themselves when he touched them. The phone she left him had no lock, no passcode, just a single folder labeled with a word too ordinary to matter: family. Inside it were recordings, not videos. Audio, raw, unfiltered. Names spoken like weapons. Hospitals that existed only on paper. Charities that moved money and nothing else. Medical grants that never treated patients. A ledger soaked clean in rhetoric and stained underneath with bodies. Her voice threaded through it all. Not scared, precise. She wasn't confessing. She was documenting. He played one file twice, then a third time. Her voice shook for half a breath and then steadied. They don't run trials. They run supply lines. They sell hope the way dealers sell drugs. Dose-controlled, addictive, legal enough until it isn't. He felt sick without moving. Another file. They don't let people die. They let them live wrong. Long enough to drain everyone who loves them. Another. They'll let you believe you're lucky to be sick, because they're there to help you. He sat back, stared at the ceiling like it might answer him. Then he opened the second folder. It wasn't named. It didn't need to be. Inside were scans, invoices, travel logs, signatures. Not hers, his family's. He didn't touch the screen for a long time. When he finally did, it was like putting 2 fingers into ice water. Numbers made sense when nothing else did. And these numbers were screaming. Money moved in perfect circles. Philanthropy entered the system clean. Treatment expenses exited with smiles. And overflow disappeared. He followed the trail. 2 hospitals, 3 shell corporations. A research wing named for a dead man he only remembered from a portrait on a staircase. 4 new trusts opened in foreign ports. Every breadcrumb led back to one source. Not him. Never him. The name on everything had been so obvious that it had disappeared behind its own authority. His blood went quiet. The engagement had not been an announcement. It had been insulation, a shield, a story. He closed his eyes and saw her face from that first day, not the desk, not the voice. The way she entered rooms like someone who could see the cracks in the wall before the house admitted it had any. He pulled up an image from the gala photograph he'd discovered in his office. Zoomed in. Her badge was visible. Not front desk. Not assistant. A department that didn't exist now. A title that had been scrubbed. He searched it. Nothing returned. That kind of nothing meant something had been erased very well. He leaned forward again. Deeper. A name surfaced inside a name. A foundation within a foundation. A vice signature that passed everything and called it mercy. And then he saw it. A patient number that meant nothing until it meant everything. The same ID appeared in 2 places. 2 dates. 2 cities. 1 body. He opened the file. The photograph was grainy. Hospital lighting bad enough to tell the truth on accident. He recognized her cousin from a picture she once kept tucked into a notebook. The woman who had shown up at his door breathing like a broken alarm. The same jawline. The same eyes. Different room. different chart. A hand reached for the screen like it could still intervene. Something icy threaded through his spine. The next file ended it. The document had no emotion in its font. Trial migration approved. No consent signature. Just a stamp. A copy pasted from another form. The past answered him then. The reason she never talked about hospitals. The reason she flinched at white rooms. The reason she changed names like it was a talent rather than a necessity. The reason she knew what leverage meant. Not as a word, as a bruise. His phone lit up. A number he didn't recognize. He didn't let it ring twice. "Stop digging," a man said calmly. No greeting, no name, just certainty. "I just found a grave," he said. A breath on the other end. Tiny, "What you found is classified." "What you built," he answered, "is a cemetery." Silence went hard. Then a voice he had heard his entire life answered in a tone he did not recognize. "Watch yourself." Something in him laughed. "Watch you," he said. The line went dead. The room wasn't a room anymore. It was a weapon. He didn't notice when the light changed from night to morning. Didn't notice the city waking up beneath him like an accomplice. He noticed only when the phone vibrated again. This time it was a message. No name, no spelling mistakes, just a sentence delivered clean. "She came looking for your cousin." His hand closed around the phone. Hard. They moved her instead. He stood so fast the chair obeyed gravity. He pulled on a coat he hadn't worn in years. Left the penthouse without telling anyone. At a clinic that did not pretend to be anything else, a woman lay motionless beneath blue light. No phone, no visitors. No chart with her real name. A nurse passed by and didn't look inside. A man passed by and smiled at a staff member. A camera blinked once. The woman did not. And somewhere between glass towers and covered signatures, the truth began to make a sound. Low. Mechanical. Like machines waking up after a long sleep. Nothing had been random. Not the job. Not the desk. Not the note. Not the pregnancy. Not even the engagement. It had all been a design. And the design had never intended to spare her. Or the children. Or him. It had only intended to use them. Every last one. The kind of building that smelled like power even before you walked inside. Clean air, cold light. People dressed like decisions had already been made without them. She walked in with a borrowed name and borrowed breath. Ashcroft Tower rose in front of her the way verdicts do. Too tall to argue with. She had not planned to come here. But plans had stopped respecting her weeks ago. Inside, the lobby was a cathedral to money. Glass everywhere. Guards whose eyes didn't blink. A receptionist whose smile lived far away from her face. The elevator swallowed her whole. Every floor number felt like a countdown. When the doors opened, she stepped into a world that still remembered her the wrong way. Her old badge had been deactivated. Of course it had. A woman in tailored authority took her arm without touching her. "Miss," she said, already walking. She didn't correct the name. She let herself be guided into a large room dressed for confidence and betrayal. A boardroom, long table, soft chairs, screens waiting to testify. And at the far end, him. He stood when he saw her. Not quickly, not loudly, like a man who had braced for this moment in his blood but still wasn't ready to endure it. Silence fell into the room like a dropped knife. Every chair remembered its purpose. Every face sharpened. For one cruel second, the world held its breath and neither of them was allowed to touch it. Then the voices returned. Introductions, motions, language that pretended this was business. She did not move. He did not sit. Eyes met once. Not lovers, not enemies, witnesses. The woman in charge of the room cleared her throat. "Miss," she said again, still wrong. "You'll sit here." The chair was beside him. Of course it was. Something heavy settled into her chest the moment she sat. Not panic. Something smaller. Colder. The kind of dread that arrives wearing logic. The meeting began. Numbers appeared. Plans unfolded. A merger disguised as destiny. The air shifted with ambition. And then she felt it, a sudden wave of wrong heat. Black. Her vision curled at the edges like burning paper. She gripped the edge of the table. He saw it. Not the weakness, the lie of her strength failing. His hand twitched before he stopped it. Someone noticed. Someone always does. A man at the far end of the table leaned back slightly, smiled. He didn't look at her. He looked at him. It was not curiosity. It was possession. The man spoke calmly. Too calmly. "Are you always this quiet?" he asked her. She forced her eyes to steady. "I speak when it matters." The room murmured. The man's smile did not move. "Interesting," he said. "Some people save their energy for secrets." The words sank into the table like a nail. Her throat went dry. His jaw tightened. The man's gaze slid to her posture, her hands, lingered for half a beat too long. Then, soft, deadly. "Congratulations," he said to him, gesturing gently, as if nothing had changed. "On the engagement." The word crawled its way across her spine. She focused on breathing. In, out, in, out. Then the man leaned forward just enough for only one pair of ears. "Be careful," he murmured. "Some people build lives on things they shouldn't carry." She didn't turn, but he did. Eyes like winter. A slow, silent war began in that look. The meeting dragged like punishment. By the time it ended, she could barely stand. He reached for her arm without thinking, stopped himself when others were watching. She swayed. Not from weakness, from silence screaming too loudly. In the hallway, the walls narrowed. He followed her without permission. She didn't stop until the door swallowed sound behind her in a utility corridor that had forgotten its original name. She faced him like an accusation. "You should not be here," she said first. "You should have told me they had you," he answered. Her laugh cracked. "They don't have me," she whispered. "They're tracing me." He stepped closer. The building pulsed around them. "Then let me burn their map," he said. Her hand moved instinctively, touched her stomach, disappeared. He saw it anyway. The world tilted again. "Ashcroft," a voice called from behind. The same man, closer now, uninvited, watching. Her blood iced. He turned slowly. "Yes," he said. The man regarded her thoughtfully. Not like prey, like evidence. "There's something about her," he said casually. "Don't you think?" Silence had teeth. She did not move. She could not. The man smiled again, then left. When the hall was empty, she leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. He did not touch her, but he braced himself in front of her as if daring the air to try again. "They know," she said. "Let them," he answered. "They always do," she whispered. She opened her eyes. No tears, no weakness. Just truth, standing upright in borrowed skin. "If you protect me," she said quietly, "they will destroy you." His voice dropped. "Then I'll finally know what deserves it." She shook her head. Not disagreement. Grief. The building swallowed her footsteps as she walked away. He did not chase, not because he didn't want to, because she needed him alive more than she needed him near. Behind them, a man who had never known loss stood in shadow and smiled, because now he was certain. She was carrying something worth taking. White walls, white curtains, white lies. She sat on the edge of the exam table like gravity was a suggestion she no longer believed in. The air smelled the way futures do when they're about to change shape. He stood too close again, not touching, not leaving. The technician spoke in trained calm and professional distance, as if words could be sterile if you tried hard enough. A vial filled. Then another. A quiet click. Another label. Another future folded into plastic. She stared at the ceiling like it might blink first. Good news always arrives the same way heartbreak does. softly, like it's scared of you. When the doctor came back, the room held its breath. The tone was gentle. It made everything worse. "The paternity markers are definitive," the doctor said. He didn't ask what that meant. He already knew. The world had tilted enough times lately that confirmation felt like a dull echo. "They're yours," the doctor added. Silence expanded. He swallowed the sound. Her hands trembled before she forced them still. "There's more," the doctor said, because there always is. The next sentence walked in dressed as medicine. "There's a condition forming in one of the fetuses." The word made no sound when it landed. Just wait. Rare condition. Blood pathways misfiring. Cells behaving like strangers. Treatment existed. Time did not. The doctor kept talking. Words became stares. Too many of them. She stopped listening. He did not. Because he recognized the name of the condition. Not from family. From a file. From a patient. From a photograph under bad hospital lighting. From a cousin whose chart had been stamped and restamped until it forgot why it existed. The same defect. The same quiet sabotage. The same weapon hiding in anatomy. His heart did something ugly in his chest. She watched his face collapse into understanding. "You knew," she said quietly. Not accusing. Grieving. He nodded. The room went thin. Her hands moved to her stomach with an instinct older than language. "They're not just our children," she breathed. "They're evidence." The doctor waited for questions. None came. Some truths don't invite curiosity. They order grief. Outside the clinic, the air felt unreal. Snow fell in careful pieces, rehearsed and beautiful. She leaned against the cold brick and shut her eyes. "They designed this," she whispered. Not emotional, exact. It wasn't fear in her voice. It was science. "They didn't aim at me," she went on. "They aimed through me." He placed his hands on the wall, one on either side of her head without touching her skin. "They won't touch you again," he said. Her breath caught. "They already have," she said. And he knew she was right. Because a body is the first battlefield people pretend not to see. Because this wasn't illness, it was engineering. Because somewhere in a ledger with soft fonts and violent margins, someone had decided this child would make money. They drove in silence. A city passed them, pretending not to notice the kind of war that doesn't wear uniforms. Back at the penthouse, the air had been changed, not alarmed, controlled. People he didn't know stood where furniture used to be. Security wearing friendliness. Contracts smiling on tables. A woman waited with champagne she didn't offer to pour. He took in the scene without blinking. "Private," he said. Not loud, not kind. Private happened. The room emptied like obedience had a switch. When they were alone, she stood by the window and stared at a skyline that offered nothing but expensive lies. "They put you in a photograph," she said suddenly. He turned. "A photograph you didn't know you were taking," she continued. "A wedding that isn't real, a life they use as a decoy." He waited. "They want me quiet," she said. "They want you glowing. They want the babies. Somewhere else." The words hurt less than they should have, because he had been expecting worse. "How much time?" he asked. She shrugged. "Days," she said. "Weeks. Whatever buys them margin." He smiled, not softly, not kindly. "Then we take their margin," he said. Her eyes found him, finally, whole. "You'd burn your world for this," she said. "For you," he replied. She shook her head slowly. "Not me," she corrected. "For them." He didn't argue. Sometimes bravery isn't loud enough to disagree. That night she found him on the terrace staring at nothing. He was already mid-war. Banks, accounts, foundations that had never healed anyone, boards with plastic souls. He watched numbers fall into patterns the way some men watch stars. "They built a maze," he said. "They forgot I own the map." She stepped closer. Cold air kissed their faces. "You're not supposed to see this part of me," he added. "The part that dismantles quietly." Her mouth curved for the first time that day, then vanished. "Don't fight for me," she said. He didn't look away from the city. "I'm fighting because of you," he answered. A message lit his phone. One line, no punctuation, no flair, just truth walking in with its shoes still on. "We know what you did today." He didn't flinch. She saw it. The stillness in his shoulders. The way men look right before they decide nothing else matters. Her voice dropped. "They won't stop," she said. His eyes stayed on the skyline. "Neither will I." And somewhere, not far from where the snow was falling beautifully, a man who believed he owned futures opened a file with 2 heartbeats inside it, and smiled. The file didn't open all at once. It resisted, stuttered, coughed up pieces like it didn't want to be remembered. Photographs first. Old ones, not framed for living rooms, framed for evidence. A woman stood in every image like she didn't know she was about to be erased. Dark hair pinned tight, eyes that refused to be small, a posture that carried consequence in its bones. His mother, not smiling, not performing, just standing there like a problem someone hadn't solved yet. A hospital corridor followed. Different building, same posture, a boardroom after that. Another smileless moment. Another missing witness waiting to happen. The dates began to line up the moment the truth decided it wanted out. Not death, removal, not illness, refusal. She had said no. They had not accepted it. The clinic record appeared next. Cause of death typed the way a lie always is. Politely. Complication. Sudden. Unavoidable. He laughed once, then stopped, because the next document had no softness at all. A request. Not for forgiveness. For silence. Signed by a name he had learned to trust before he learned to question anything else in his life. The lie crashed through him without a sound. The room changed temperature. Music downstairs kept playing like nothing had happened. Someone clinked a glass. Someone toasted. Another version of his life kept going without him. He scrolled again. Her medical chart did not end the way charts were supposed to. It stopped. In the middle. Handwritten note where a system should have taken over. Intervention successful. Not treatment. Intervention. That word lived in war rooms, not hospitals. He stood from the chair like he might shatter it from the inside. The city outside was spectacular with indifference. Lights blinking, cars flowing, people loving and cheating and working and dying without ever knowing the blueprint in the walls. He turned back to the screen. Something else had surfaced. A list. Not a patient list. A replacement list. New appointments scheduled while old ones quietly failed. People swapped, labeled, migrated, not healed, moved. He saw the pattern then. Not charts, not labs, not trials. This was logistics. Bodies went in, money came out, silence followed. And his mother? She hadn't been sick. She'd been dangerous. The kind of dangerous that refuses instead of disappears. The kind of dangerous that looks you in the eye and says, "No one owns your bloodline." The file she left behind carried her voice. Not recorded. Written. A journal. Unpublished. Unforgiving. If you find this, it means I failed with my mouth and succeeded with my hands. He closed his eyes, opened them again. They don't kill you when you disobey. They erase you and call it fate. His chest hurt in quiet places. Promise me you won't inherit this company. Burn it if you have to. Power that comes from suffering always collects interest. He pressed his fingers into his eyes like the world might reset if he refused to see it properly. Her last entry was short. They will come through family. They always do. He opened another file. The engagement contract. Not ceremonial. Transactional. Holidays rewritten as photo ops. Children scheduled as optics. A legacy wrapped in paper so white it bled. Every document bore the same faint watermark. The same signature shadow. The same arrogance dressed as approval. One man's handwriting across every death pretending to be help. He knew the curve of it without ever wanting to. The force of it. The way it leaned forward like something that had never been told no. His phone vibrated. Once. He didn't touch it. Again. Twice. He answered on the third with silence. A familiar voice flooded the room. Calm. Confident. Cold without needing to shout. "So," the man said, "you finally dug where you weren't supposed to." He didn't speak. "So dramatic," the voice continued. "Your mother was always like that. Emotional. Unprofitable." He closed his eyes. "She tried to dismantle a system that feeds thousands." The man went on gently. "What did she think would happen?" His fingers curled into the desk. "She thought you might become better than this," he said. The silence on the other end sharpened. "You were never meant to know," the voice replied. "You were meant to inherit without asking questions. Most sons do." He exhaled, slow. "You murdered her," he said. A pause. Brief. Then, amusement. "I solved her," the voice corrected. "There's a difference." Something hot moved in his blood. "Don't do this," the man warned. "This isn't a story with a noble ending. You'll lose everyone you love." The line held. The invitation hung. He looked at the dark window, at the city he was supposed to save from boredom and not from itself, at the place that dressed monsters in tailored suits and called it leadership. "Maybe," he said quietly, "but so will you." The call ended without a goodbye. The room breathed again, but slower, like it was healing around a wound. He picked up the engagement ring from the table and held it between his fingers. Not as a symbol, as a weapon. Then he placed it down. Not gently, not angrily. Precisely. That night, the city continued to celebrate. Lights climbed buildings. Champagne dissolved into laughter. Another photograph went viral. The bride glowed. The groom did not. And somewhere under layers of paperwork that had learned to kill politely, a truth stood up, picked a side, and began to walk toward daylight with no intention of stopping. The penthouse woke like a stranger wearing his sheets. Sunlight pressed against windows that had never asked permission to reveal things. The city below smiled the way it always did when it had already chosen sides. He hadn't slept. He stood in the kitchen where nothing had ever broken by accident and stared at a cup he hadn't touched. Somewhere behind him, the apartment made the careful sounds of a place that thought it still belonged to one man. His phone lay face down on the counter. It didn't vibrate. It didn't ring. And somehow, it was louder than anything else in the room. He turned it over. A single message waited. No greeting. No threats. No cruelty dressed as manners. Just coordinates. And one sentence. "Come alone." He read it twice. Then a third time the way you read a medical chart when the words won't hold still. In another part of the city, she sat straight-backed in a chair that did not pretend to be comfortable. Fluorescent lights flattened her into a version of herself that felt almost portable. A man stood by the window with his hands in his pockets, like he'd been born inside this room. "You didn't have to make this complicated," he said without turning. She didn't answer. "You left records," he went on mildly. "People who leave records tend to believe in rescue. That's always adorable." He finally faced her. All posture, all control. The kind of smile that doesn't bother being real. "They can't reach you anymore," he said. "I made sure of that. Clinic transfers are very efficient when you own the hallways." Her throat moved. "You're lying," she said. "No," he answered. "I'm economizing." Her hands tightened in her lap. "Where is my cousin?" she asked. He tilted his head as if hearing an old song. "Alive," he said. "Expensive. Fragile. Useful." Her breath broke. He lifted a hand gently. "Don't," he said. "Not yet. Crying doesn't negotiate well." She swallowed. "What do you want?" she asked. He smiled as if she'd finally introduced herself. "Silence," he said. distance, and a future that does not include embarrassing truths. He walked closer, pointed his finger at her belly without touching it. And those, he added, they will be monitored. Professionally, privately, profitably. She lurched to her feet. They're not yours, she said. Everything is, he replied softly. If you wait long enough. He opened the door. 2 men waited outside it. Then he looked back at her. One choice, he said. Disappear today, and the people you still love will remain intact. Or resist, and discover how loudly hospitals can scream without making a sound. She closed her eyes, and somewhere across the city, he was driving too fast through streets that refused to get out of his way. The address pulled him forward with gravity he didn't remember consenting to. Traffic blurred. Horns dissolved. The city became a suggestion. When he arrived, the building said nothing. An old medical annex that had learned how to hide behind donations. A place where elevators didn't whistle. They exhaled. He stepped inside. Security stared through him like he had memorized their faces first. They didn't stop him. They never stopped the familiar. Down a hallway that smelled like money and disinfectant, he found a door without a name. It opened before he touched it. She stood in the center of the room, not restrained, not free, beautiful in that dangerous way that refuses to expire. He took a step toward her. She shook her head once. Small. Emergency. A mirror flashed behind her. A screen. Medical readouts he didn't want to understand. And the man who had learned how to kill without blowing out candles stood by the wall. Sit, the man said pleasantly. He didn't. You're very dramatic, the man continued. It's genetic. He smiled thinly and gestured to the screen. Your children are very interesting, he said. I've waited years to make something like them. The word made the room recoil. You don't get to name them, he said. The man's smile faltered for half a second, then returned. On the contrary, he replied, I built the world they're entering. She looked at him then, not pleading, not begging, commanding. Don't. He understood at once. Too much. She stepped forward. No, she said. Both men spoke at once. She held up a hand. I choose, she continued. The other man leaned back, enjoying this. You don't, he said. Watch me, she answered. She turned to him, eyes steady, not afraid anymore. I will go, she said quietly. I'll disappear. I won't touch your air again. I won't drag you through this. He shook his head. She swallowed, and broke her own heart for him. I'll leave, she whispered. If you promise them safety. The man smiled, a contract in bone and breath. Agreed, he said. She closed her eyes. The room went too still. He moved forward. She didn't look at him, because if she did, she wouldn't go. I'm sorry, she said into the floor. This is how I love you. The man clapped once. Touching, he said. Let's not ruin it with courage. She walked to the door without goodbye, without tears, without permission. He went to follow. 2 hands found his shoulders. Not rough, not kind. Final. The door closed behind her. And inside the silence that followed, he understood the war had become personal. Not political, not corporate. Personal. In the quiet, his phone lit up. A single message from her. Delivered. Final. Don't try to save me. Save them. The screen dimmed, and somewhere beneath white lights that never apologized, a woman disappeared without dying, which, he knew now, was always the crueler trick. He stood alone in the elevator as it climbed, the air moving with the discipline of a building that believed in itself. His reflection did not look back the same way. Something in his eyes had been taken out and replaced with a decision. The doors opened on a floor that had never known mercy. The boardroom waited the way execution rooms do, long, polished, spotless, and unforgiving. Men and women in tailored confidence sat around a table that had ended more lives than it had ever saved. Screens glowed softly at the far end, waiting to lie beautifully. A woman in champagne silk stood to greet him. She looked like history had been kind to her. It hadn't. He took his seat without acknowledging anything but the sound of his own blood. The meeting began as it always did. Numbers without faces. Forecasts without weather. Promises without children attached to them. Then a man cleared his throat, subtle. The way hurricanes announce themselves, he didn't wait for permission. "You've been distracted," the man said lightly. "Not like you." A small murmur circled the table. He leaned back slow enough to let every person in the room decide where they stood. "Yes," he said. "I have been." Silence. The kind that smells blood. "You're going to love the reason," he added. A few smiles appeared. None lasted. He pressed a single button on the console. Not dramatic, exact. Every screen shifted at once. Documents stacked themselves like an accusation. Invoices, transfers, trial authorizations, then records, medical, names, photographs. Not framed for pity, stamped for profit. He stayed still while the room changed temperature. "And while we're here," he said quietly, "I'd like to discuss philanthropy." No one laughed. Good. "This company," he went on, "doesn't heal people. It circulates them. It uses their sickness the way banks use interest." Someone stood. "Sit," another voice said. No one did. The screens moved again. A hallway. A clinic. A woman sitting beneath white light. Her face drained of color, but not courage. The room inhaled. A voice broke. Someone said her name wrong. He didn't correct it. "Some of you built this," he said. "Some of you funded it. Others pretended not to notice." He pointed at the screen. "And one of you engineered it." The man in the corner did not move. Not when eyes turned. Not when thunder tried to gather in fabric and cartilage. The man only smiled. Soft. Bored. "How theatrical," the man said. "You think you've discovered a crime. What you've found is a system. And systems don't go to prison. They get rebranded." A woman gasped. Someone else cursed. The man clasped his hands like a preacher. "You made a mistake bringing emotion into a business conversation," he said. "That's always how people lose their companies." He met the man's eyes. "No," he answered. "This is how people lose their disguises." Phones lit up across the table, simultaneously. One sound, dozens, a mosquito whine of panic. Then the screens changed again. Bank accounts, frozen. Trusts flagging red. Foundations named aloud like the dead. Charity audits unspooling like confessions. The room tried to breathe and failed. The man stood then, calm, controlled, still smiling. "You really think you can outspend me?" he asked. "Yes," he answered. The room tilted. A man laughed nervously. Someone else whispered what sounded like pray. The woman in champagne silk finally spoke. "You'll destroy us," she said. He looked at her the way surgeons look at infection. "No," he said. "You did that yourselves. I'm just letting physics take over." The man moved closer, not threatening, curious. "You're emotional," he said. "That's the flaw. I expected better." He leaned in. "So did she," he said quietly. The man's smile twitched. Barely. A hand nudged a chair. Someone stood back from the table like it had grown teeth. "Do you have any idea," the man murmured, "what it takes to build something like this?" "Blood," he replied. The words sank into the room. "And bones," he added. A heavy silence answered. Then he spoke again, louder, for everyone. "This company ends today. The programs stop." The money freezes. The files go public. Every single one. The man laughed. Once. Cold. I own half the board. He nodded. I own tomorrow. The words hit harder than shouting ever could. This is illegal, someone cried. So was selling sickness, he replied without blinking. A phone rang. Not one. Dozens. The wrong song. The right time. Then a single notification cut through the chaos and ran straight through his chest. A message. From her. One sentence. No punctuation. No apology. Just truth. They're moving me. His jaw locked. The man across from him watched his face and finally looked entertained. I warned you, the man said gently. Lose the crusade or lose the woman. He rose, slow enough for the world to feel it. Do your worst, he said. The words landed clean, like a match. The room turned on itself. Voices clashed. Alliances collapsed. Old friends learned new names for one another. He left while the board swallowed its own poison. In the elevator, the city came rushing back into him. And for the first time in his life, he stopped trying to control any of it. He dialed one number. Not a banker, not a lawyer. A man who believed in extraction more than excuses. Her cousin's voice answered, ragged and alive in the background like a promise that had almost bled out. I'm not safe, she whispered. He closed his eyes. I'm coming, he said. Reality didn't ask how. It only flinched. Behind him, glass cracked in places sound couldn't reach. And somewhere moving through corridors that smelled like anonymity, a woman was no longer invisible. She was just missing. There's a difference. And it doesn't end well. He didn't stop at the lobby. He didn't answer calls. He didn't explain. The city opened its teeth and he drove through them anyway, every streetlight a pulse, every turn a promise he could not afford to break. The man who believed in extraction met him where silence kept its tools. No paperwork, no greetings, just an understanding older than money. Within an hour, bank doors slammed shut, like vaults learning fear. Accounts that had never known winter froze mid-breath. Foundations that taught the world how to forgive were suddenly forced to explain who paid for the sins. Screens across the city lit again, this time not with projections, with receipts. Hospitals that never healed, donations that never arrived, trusts that trusted no one. By nightfall, the lie had lost its makeup. Reporters lined marble steps like a firing squad. Cameras pierced penthouses and clinics alike. Words turned sharp when they finally found oxygen, and somewhere between headlines and handcuffs, the man who thought he owned tomorrow began to run out of today. He found her trail in numbers first. Logistics always spoke louder than threats. An inventory listing that wasn't equipment. A shipping manifest that wasn't legal. A flight that disappeared in a place that only carried secrets. He listened to movement more than men, followed noise without sound, and when the coordinates led him north instead of nowhere, he let the city go quiet behind him. The night swallowed the highway. Pines watched. Snow hid footprints before they could remember confession. He kept driving until the map forgot him. The estate didn't announce itself. It waited. A house older than permission crouched beneath frost and shadow. Windows burned low. A generator whispered like a conscience that still worked. No guards, no dogs, only a door that had learned the language of locking. Inside, the air was sterile where it shouldn't be. Lights hummed, machines breathed. He followed them, down a corridor that pretended to be part of a home, into a room that had never known one. She lay on a narrow bed beneath soft tyranny. Not bound, just monitored. The kind of captivity that smiles. He reached her before the camera finished blinking. Her eyes opened like she had been holding them that way all along. You came, she whispered. He closed the distance with his hands. I always do, he said. Footsteps arrived the way rain does. Unavoidable. The man stepped into the room with calm that did not apologize. You've been busy, he said pleasantly. Impressive for someone breaking his own world. He didn't turn. "Step back," he answered. The man sighed. Still emotional. The screen behind him lit. A button pulsed. Soft. Red. "You push," the man continued. "And the life you tried so hard to preserve stops participating." She gasped. He didn't. "Then you pull," the man added. "And we all pretend this never happened." He looked at her. Touched her cheek once. Light. Present. Then he looked at the man. "Pull it," he said. The man smiled. Nothing happened. He frowned. Pressed again. Nothing. A sound cut in. A voice that hadn't existed in the room until that moment. "One system down," it said coolly from a hidden speaker. Another followed. "Second system disabled." The man's composure cracked like a politician in winter. He lunged. Too late. The room went dark for half a heartbeat. Then, light returned. Not theirs. Hard. Official. Flashlights. Commands. A voice with authority that didn't rehearse. "Hands where I can see them." The man tried to speak. No one let him. Maine took custody without ceremony. Snow welcomed the truth and made no promises. Outside, she breathed for the first time like it counted. The house surrendered. The machines were pulled from walls. The walls stopped lying. Cameras died. And the man who thought he owned blood finally met a language it did not speak. Law. She leaned into him and laughed weakly into his jacket like the world was an inside joke she had finally survived. "I told you not to come," she said. He answered into her hair. "You never told me not to win." The mountain hospital smelled like pine and honesty. Nurses spoke softly, as if the air itself were listening for thank yous. Naomi lived, not perfectly, but alive has its own color. The surgery took hours that had no names. 2 small voices arrived before daylight, not loud, not fragile, announcing themselves gently into a world that had tried to steal their right to breathe. One cried. The other listened first. He held both like they had always belonged to his hands. She watched, exhausted and smiling, as 8 months of terror finally met their evacuation point. "You look like the worst criminal I've ever trusted," she whispered. He laughed into tears he did not permit to finish falling. The news broke clean. No spin, no cushioning. Foundations collapsed into subpoenas. Hospitals reopened under different names. The old empire burned politely, with paperwork. The man who believed he owned tomorrow tried to buy today, and found the market closed. Maribel was charged. Kieran vanished into headlines and history, and the city went quiet in places it didn't know it needed silence. Weeks later, the lake thawed like forgiveness. They walked without planning. No destination. Just air. The babies slept like monarchs with no interest in power. Naomi watched from a nearby bench, smiling like survival had finally taught her its name. "Do you regret it?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "Only the days I didn't start sooner." That night, when phones stopped pretending to behave, a message arrived. Unknown number. 6 words. "You don't get to keep everything." He read it, deleted it, pulled her closer. Some ghosts send mail. Most eventually stop. At dawn, he stood on the porch alone and watched fog remember the water. One child stirred inside. The other slept on. He counted breaths. Always 2. Inside, she slept with the exhaustion of someone who had finished running. The house had no address, no cameras, no donors, no history, just warmth learning how to stay. And so the story did not end. It made a home, where power could not follow, where names did not matter, where love learned it was allowed to last, and somewhere far away, in a city that had already moved on without apology. A man who lost learned the only thing that hurts worse than defeat: being forgotten.